Hey, how's it going, guys? Thank you for joining me on this week's episode of The Real Deal. I got my logo back here now. So this week we're talking about debt to income ratios. That's a big topic that comes up, and a lot of times this will be one of the other reasons why clients will hesitate to submit their application because they don't know if they'll qualify. It's crucial. We got to make sure that your debt to income ratio works within the program guidelines. To make sure that you can purchase a house within a reasonable price range. Also, we'll talk about how much a difference of 20 grand or 40 grand makes in your purchase price. I'll give you guys an example of a client that purchased under her potential qualification, and now she's trying to sell again, and unfortunately she can't because her credit was damaged. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the basic qualifications or basic requirements when it comes to debt to income ratios. Now I'm going to go over best case scenarios, and I'm going to use FHA as an example because FHA financing is usually a little bit more flexible when it comes to your debt to income ratios, and I'll go over you supplying your own down payment versus you using down payment assistance because it's a 50-50 shot. Half my clients use down payment assistance, half of them have their own down payment and take advantage of the lower interest rates. Cool. So let's go ahead and switch over to my trusty little cam here. Give me a second. All right. So we have currently on display here a breakdown on a mortgage payment on a $270,000 house. And this is standard taxes, nothing crazy, standard HOA, $50 a month. This interest rate right now at 3.625 is with 3% of down payment assistance. You would be in charge of covering 0.5%, which is about $1,200-1,300 of that. But still, you'd be getting a big chunk of that coverage, so about 8 grand. Phenomenal rate. I mean, 3.625 is insane. Now, you can get a lower interest rate with your own down payment, but obviously you have to come up with the entire $9,500. However, when I go over the debt to income ratios, we'll kind of look at the numbers, and sometimes you really don't have an option. You have to use some of that savings because the ratios do get a little bit more relaxed when you have your own down payment, okay? So let's look at, so we'll assume that same $1,600 payment, right? So we're going to add that to this reoccurring monthly debt section here. If you guys go to bankrate.com, you guys can find a bunch of different calculators and stuff. So assuming a $1,600 mortgage, right? In theory, if you're using down payment assistance and your credit score is above a 680, then you can qualify up to 50% total debt to income, right? So $1,600 with zero debt, that's obviously $3,200 a month gross. That's another thing too, gross. That's the not your net, not your take home, but this is like what your hourly wage ends up being or whatnot. So in that scenario, somebody making whatever $3,200 a month ends up being, so $3,200 a month divided by 160, that's about $20 an hour, right? So about $20 an hour, zero debt, you could qualify $270,000 house using down payment assistance. However, things start getting a little bit trickier when you start adding your debt to that, right? Most people have some sort of credit card, some sort of debt, because that's the only way to get your credit score higher. You have to have debt. There's no way around it. Now, if you have credit cards that are open, but they're at a zero balance, that's okay. We can exclude that debt. But let's assume, typical car payment, I don't know, $400. And maybe minimum payments on credit cards are about $100 a month, right? That's an extra $500 that we have to add to that monthly reoccurring debt. So if we do that, $1,900 a month in reoccurring debt, now we're way over that 50% mark, right? So then in that situation, obviously the buyer would either have to pay off some debt, pay off the car, credit cards, or they would have to get a cosigner so that way we can increase that gross income. Or at that point, then the conversation would be, hey, potentially, do you have your own funds? Can you go into a 401k to get your own down payment? Because with your own down payment, you can increase that from 50 to 57%. A lot of times when I help out couples, for one reason or another, most of the time it's one person going on the loan. So there's a completely different income that we're not even including. And in theory, yeah, both incomes would qualify, but maybe because of credit or whatever reason, the other income isn't getting added into the loan. So we know you qualify, but obviously we're only using the one income. So in that situation, Obviously, we're still at 59%, but you have to take into account that if you provide your own down payment, then your interest rate goes down. So if somebody hovering around a 680 credit score, right now you can probably get a 3% interest rate. So obviously, if we reduce the interest rate, monthly payment goes down almost $100. So then now the numbers work out. We reduce the 1900 down to 1800, and then we're under the 57% debt to income mark. Right. So that's kind of how the debt to income ratios work when it comes to FHA financing. Conventional is a little bit different. They're a little bit more strict. That's going to be a whole, we got to sit down and talk and go over your numbers to break down your numbers. But this is something that I know for sure. FHA is always just set in stone. There's certain things that don't change with FHA. The PMI doesn't change. With conventional financing, the PMI is based off your credit score, and there's a lot of stuff that kind of goes into it. But in this particular case, right, somebody making $20 an hour with no debt, they could in theory qualify for a $270,000 house using down payment assistance. Or if that person has your typical car payment, your typical credit cards, then they're either faced with the decision of paying for their own down payment or decreasing the purchase price. But you're going to kind of see right now that decreasing the purchase price would take a lot to get onto the debt to income ratios that we need. So let's go back to down payment assistance, 3.625 interest rate. Monthly payment is $1,611 a month, right? And then before we added the $500, well, let's start from scratch with the monthly debt. So let's say you're looking at $220,000 house. All right, it's possible, a lot harder to find nowadays. Most of the time, they're going to need a little bit of work, but we have a $1,330 mortgage, $220,000 house. I mean, that could be your starter home, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, possible 3-bedroom, 2-bath, depending on where we're looking at. It is possible, but definitely it is a little bit tougher. So let's add that $1,300 payment plus. I think we had $500 before, so we're back at $1,832 a month. Give me a second. What did I do? Yeah, so at $1,832 a month. So with the $1,300 monthly payment for your mortgage, and then let's say you have $500 a month in debt, then your debt to income ratio is 57%. You could still qualify, using your own down payment. Now, obviously, if you have zero debt, once again, it's possible. If you don't have a car payment and you have small credit cards, then we're way under the debt to income ratio of 50%, right? So if you're in a situation where you don't have a ton of debt, right? Maybe you have a couple small credit cards and you're making about $20 an hour, you can totally qualify for 220. We could probably even go up to 240. Yeah, I mean 1447. Yeah, we're still under the 50%, Let's go up to 260. 1562. So that's kind of where that breaking point will be. So with zero debt, that kind of gives you guys an idea too on how big of an impact a car payment makes on your qualification. Every $100 a month that you have in debt reduces your purchase price by about 20 grand. So a $400 car payment reduces your purchase price by 80 grand. So it's a big deal. If you've been thinking about buying a house, but you've also been thinking about buying a car, buy the house first, because buying a car is going to really affect your qualification amount. Obviously, you'll eventually need a car, but wait until you purchase a house before you go down that road. So let's talk about, and you guys can saw when you guys were looking right there at that screen, every 20 grand will increase or decrease your monthly payment by about $100 and $110 a month, right? So we kind of went through the numbers right there. So $260,000 house, $1,562 a month. We go to 280, it goes up to $1,678 a month, right? So let's say you're looking for a house, and this is where we're going to talk a little bit about the situation that my client went through. So